So let's go ahead and begin the third part of the Origin and Diversity of Life lecture. Big things again to keep in mind. The Earth is estimated to be about 4.6 billion years old roughly. The earliest evidence of life, 3.6 billion years old. We do have those microfossils dating about 3.5 billion years. So we know life started on Earth a long time ago. How it started, still being tested. Once it got here though, lots of different things caused it to change, to evolve, to diversify into what we see on Earth today. Life originated in water. There's usually no disagreement about that. Origin of life started as an aquatic form. Then life moved onto land. And what we want to explore now are some of the major innovations allowed for the move onto land. So to do this, life had to overcome hurdles. So we'll just call these the hurdles. Okay, first hurdle. If you're going from an aquatic lifestyle to a terrestrial lifestyle, you have to deal with gravity. How do you support your body weight on land versus in water? This is one reason why whales die when they beach themselves. It's not due to lack of oxygen. They're air breathers. They're oxygen breathers. It's because their body crushes their internal organs because it's not used to supporting its own weight on land. Water is incredibly buoyant. So overcoming gravity is a huge issue. Structurally, life adapted differently to exist and survive on land. Okay, so temperature changes are something that land-based animals have to deal with more than aquatic. Temperature changes dramatically on land. It could be 80 degrees during the day and drop down to 40 degrees at night. Or within the course of 2 or 3 days, you might lose 50, 60 degrees or go up 50 or 60 degrees. Think about different environments. Temperature changes a lot more rapidly and significantly in land-based environments than aquatic. So physiological adaptations had to evolve in order for things to survive on land and adapt to land-based environments. Sun exposure. We get a lot more sun when we're on land. There's nothing blocking solar radiation. You don't have water to deflect light rays. So it also increases susceptibility to mutations, genetic changes, because DNA mutates due to solar exposure. So think about the biotechnology unit when we talked about that. Sunlight can cause mutations, ultraviolet light. So land-based organisms had to deal with that or are exposed to greater sun exposure. Gas exchange, drawing in oxygen versus carbon dioxide, all of this changes when you're out on land. So there were some major innovations that allowed for life to move onto land. These hurdles were overcome through slow progressive adaptations and evolution of species, bridging the gap from life in water to life on land. Now life still exists in the water and it evolves and changes, but sometimes things don't change as much when they're in stable environments. That's that gradualism when we talked about the pace of evolution. So we'll see some differences between land-based animals or land-based plants, land-based life, how rapidly sometimes it evolves compared to the aquatic based life. Okay, so now when we look at the history, what we can do is look at this geological time scale. And we're going to simplify it, reduce it down to just some of the key things. If you guys, when you take an advanced course in evolution, you'll get into this a lot more. You could spend an entire semester on just geological time scale, just on certain eras or periods or time frames throughout the course of the Earth's history. We're going to keep it broad spectrum, look at major concepts, major events during each of these big time periods. So what I want you guys to focus on are the 4 big eras: the Precambrian era, the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic. We're going to look at what are the big events during each of these that we can see through fossil evidence, radioactive decay, anatomical evidence. We have all the different lines of evidence that help point to what happened during these different time periods. But primarily we're looking at the history of the fossil record and how that supports the changes in the species over the periods of time throughout the Earth's history. Okay, so let's start with the first big era, Precambrian. Major events here. Life shows up. This is 4,600 million years ago, or 4.6 billion years ago. Earth forms, and the Precambrian goes all the way until about 550 million years ago. So it's a huge amount of time. 4,000 million years, or 4 billion years, is what is blocked out as the Precambrian era. Life shows up. Life arises. Look up the date. How long ago did life arise in the prokaryotic form? Eventually, oxygen builds up in the atmosphere. Due to that oxygen, we get different metabolic pathways occurring. Cellular respiration versus anaerobic respiration versus photosynthesis, etc. And then eukaryotic cells arise. Again, when did they arise? Look that up. Make sure you guys are comfortable with the dates when these groups of organisms first appeared based on the fossil evidence that we have present today. So what we see during this era are soft-bodied invertebrate animals appearing, or organisms, because it's not just animals, soft-bodied invertebrates appearing in the fossil record. Sadly, these things don't leave great impressions, but we do have evidence of them in the fossil record from the Precambrian era. Things like jellyfish, sponges, the amoebas, these things, they can trace their ancestral history back to the Precambrian. These are some of the simplest organisms out there, simple animals, protistas, etc. They're all eukaryotes, and they can trace early origin back to, again, this Precambrian era. But while life originated, it started to adapt, it started to evolve, it started to change, and as it moves into the Paleozoic era, which is our next era, things start to diversify very rapidly. Now, big thing to mention with the Paleozoic, look at the time frame. Roughly 550 million to about 248 million. So you're looking at a little over 300 million years. It's not even a tenth of the time of the Precambrian. But we get this big increase in diversity. Diversity flourishes, and life adapts to land. Land-based life first appears during the Paleozoic. Now, two major events occurred that we want to note. Those are big yellow, I don't know what those are, yellow symbols up there. Two major events occurred during the Paleozoic, and these were mass extinctions. These were natural, climate-driven, environmental changes. Boom, large percentages of your species go extinct. In a mass extinction, it's estimated 85 to 95% of diversity on the planet goes extinct. That's not 95% of the individual in a population. That's 95% of species diversity goes extinct. So during any mass extinction, lots of the diversity is lost, but that opens up new ecological niches, and that allows for rapid evolution of species that are still alive, because there's not as much competition. So it's easier to go back to that character displacement, adaptive radiation. Hey, nobody's eating this food source. Our species evolves into that. Nobody's adapting or using this environmental niche. Our species evolves into that. So extinctions initially are very traumatic because of such a loss in diversity. It ultimately produces this rebound of incredible diversity. So during the Paleozoic, we see life going onto land. The earliest land-based life were these non-vascular plants. These things evolved from green algae. So you guys get into Bio 112, you'll look at this progression. Green algae is in the aquatic environment. It evolves to a land-based existence as non-vascular plants. Producer base has to be on land before you can get consumers or things that eat the producers. So that's happening on the shores of the ocean, shores of freshwater, aquatic environments. We're seeing plants first adapting to land-based existence. Now in the ocean, we start to see the evolution of the jawless fish. So these things, they become predators, they become things that eat other things, but they have this suction cup type of mouth structure. Some of their descendants are still present on Earth today, the hagfish, the lamprey. These are jawless fish that roam the earth today that can trace their ancestral origin back to the Paleozoic era. That's when their ancestors first appeared. Now, while life is adapting to land, it continues to change, and we see seedless vascular plants evolve. These plants are outcompeting the non-vascular. They become bigger, they become taller, they can outgrow the others, they can get more sunlight. They are still producing spores. They're not making seeds yet. But just getting bigger than that algae or that moss is enough. You outcompeted your competition, you're going to be the most adaptable. In the ocean, some of those fish evolve into jawed fish. So you're outcompeting, you're adapting to a new environmental niche, and you're able to survive a little bit better, you're able to pass on your genetics, and your offspring hopefully do well. We can see the ancestor of modern sharks showing up about 450 million years ago during the Paleozoic era. So the sharks we see today trace their history, their ancestral history, back to our Paleozoic. Early Paleozoic sharks were big. This is Megalodon. This is the tooth of a Megalodon. Here's the reconstruction of the jaw. These sharks were massive. They were eating big, gigantic, massive prey items. So if we compared it to a surfer today, this is what Megalodon would look like. Makes a great white look silly. Makes a great white look like a sissy. Gigantic, massive marine predators. They were successful. They were adaptable. And they did well for quite a while until things changed. On land, all those seedless plants, they're getting bigger. They're producing the basic forests. Our forest structures start to form. Not the forests we have today, but early forests are forming during the Paleozoic era. And we'll start to see the first evolution of seed plants, plants that actually produce seeds. Very simple. These are the cycads or cycads. Those guys are some of the earliest and most primitive of the seed plants. Animal-wise, we see insects making their appearance, moving on to land, and we see fish evolving into early, simple, primitive amphibians. So we have lobe-finned fish swimming and, more appropriately, walking the oceans of the Paleozoic, and they evolve towards this amphibian-based lifestyle. So think about a lobe-finned fish. They have legs. They walk on the bottom of the ocean. They walk on the bottom of lakes. They're not that much structurally different than these early amphibians that were present back during the Paleozoic. So here's what our amphibians look like early on during the Paleozoic. So these are small incremental changes over hundreds of millions of years that are leading to this increase in diversity of life on Earth. So during that Paleozoic, we did experience 2 mass extinctions, but that helped give rise to such a diversity. So again, mass extinction, you're losing about 85 to 95% of your diversity, but when that diversity is gone, what's left behind goes through adaptive radiation, character displacement, punctuated equilibrium, and now you get lots and lots of new diversity showing up. In the next lecture, we're going to tackle the Mesozoic era and then we'll get into the era we currently live in called the Cenozoic era.